Coders. There are stories we all heard as children. Stories so repeated, so accepted, we never think about questioning them. The story of Noah is one of them. A massive ark, a righteous man, a flood sent by God. But what no one told us is that long before Genesis, this same story already existed with the same details in cultures that had never heard of the Bible. Atrahasis, Ziusudra, names almost no one knows, yet they describe exactly the same thing. How is it possible that a Sumerian, an Akkadian, and a Hebrew share the same story, almost word for word? Genesis says, "Behold, I will bring a flood of waters upon the earth." Genesis 6:17. But 1,000 years earlier, the Sumerian tablets were already warning, the gods decided to destroy mankind. Epic of Gilgamesh, Tablet 11.
Here in Divine Code, we always say it. Coders, our purpose is not to impose beliefs. It's to investigate, to think, to decipher what others overlooked. That's why this channel exists, to break the mold, to compare stories, and to follow the clues that official history left behind. In the previous video, we explored the flood as a reset. But today, we're going to focus on the survivor, on that character who appears in 3 different civilizations, with 3 different names, and 1 identical mission. Coders. When the same hero appears in cultures separated by centuries and thousands of kilometers, it's not a coincidence, it's a pattern.
Ziusudra, the first chosen one. Coders. If we want to understand who the real survivor of the flood was, we have to go back to the origin, not to Genesis, but to Sumer. In the oldest known tablets, written between 2100 and 2000 BC, a name appears that almost no one talks about, Ziusudra, the first man of the Ark, the original. He wasn't a farmer, he wasn't some isolated old man. The tablets call him king and priest, a mediator between gods and men. The Sumerian text says, Ziusudra, the pious king, heard the command of heaven. Nippur tablet. But here's where it gets unsettling, coders. In Sumer, the flood is not a punishment for sin. There is no idea of guilt, immorality, or human corruption. The gods don't say, humanity became evil. They say something much stranger. Humanity made too much noise. Humanity grew out of control. Sumerian tradition. Noise, growth, biological excess. That's the trigger. And once again, the same conflict appears that we've seen throughout this saga. One god, Enlil, decides to wipe out humanity, the same one who, in other texts, wants to limit, reduce, control. And another god, Enki, breaks the rules, leaks the warning, and saves a single man. The text hints at it subtly. Enki spoke through the reed wall, and Ziusudra heard. Sumerian flood tablet. Coders. This isn't theology. This is an internal dispute between higher beings with opposing visions for humanity. One who forbids, another who protects. The same pattern we saw in Eden, but told 2,000 years before Genesis. And here, I'll leave the most important seed of this part. In the oldest version of the flood, the Savior is not the God who gives the order. It's the one who disobeys.
Atrahasis, the full version. Coders. When the story moves from Sumer to the Akkadian world, Ziusudra receives another name. Atrahasis, the exceedingly wise one. The name changes, the essence does not. In the Akkadian texts, the story remains almost identical. A man warned, a boat built in secret, and a flood ordered from the heavens. But here the level of detail becomes astonishing. The text describes the measurements of the boat, The layers of bitumen, the tools, even the exact instructions on how to seal every plank. Build your boat according to the measurements I give you. Make it strong. Make it watertight. Atrahasis, Tablet 3. And something even more important appears. The motives for the flood. Enlil, enraged, declares, mankind is too numerous. The noise of man is unbearable. Atrahasis, Tablet 1. Again, no sin, no moral evil, just a project that, in their view, got out of control. And in the middle of this decision, we see the most epic act of the Akkadian story. Enki, who had sworn to remain silent, breaks his oath. The text portrays it cleverly. Enki doesn't speak directly. He speaks through a reed wall, a loophole, a way not to officially break the pact, while still saving Atrahasis' life. He instructs him, guides him, and hides him from the divine council. Coders, this is not a punishing god. This is a clandestine protector fighting for human continuity. When the storm arrives, the text says, the gods cowered like frightened dogs and wept for mankind. Atrahasis, Tablet 3. It's not the moral tone of Genesis. It's a drama among higher beings who regret their decision too late. And when the waters recede, a pattern reappears that we already analyzed in the previous episode. Humanity is reset. Lifespans plummet. Human capabilities are reduced. Let the days of man be shortened. Atrahasis, Epilogue. It's the same adjustment Genesis hints at when it declares, his days shall be 120 years. Genesis 6:3. Two different cultures, one same reduction. And here we plant the seed for what comes next. Because in Atrahasis, the most unsettling idea appears for the first time, a humanity that is dangerous to its own makers. A humanity that grows, evolves, and stops being controllable. Coders, if this theme interests you, in Divine Code we've already explored this line in depth in our saga on the Book of Enoch. The Watchers, the Nephilim, and the fear the gods had of what humanity might become. But for now, let's stay with this story.
Noah, the Hebrew Reinterpretation. Coders, now we arrive at the most well-known version of all, the story of Noah. And here something fascinating happens. The Bible takes the same structure as Atrahasis, a warned man, a sealed boat, a flood that wipes out the earth. But it transforms the intention of the story. Where Atrahasis spoke of noise and growth, Genesis turns it into something moral. The earth was filled with violence. Genesis 6:11. The wickedness of man was great on the earth. Genesis 6:5. The same event, but explained from another point of view. The flood stops being a management of order and becomes a spiritual judgment. And again, without attacking beliefs, we can observe a pattern. In Sumer, the problem is biological. In Akkad, it is demographic. In the Bible, it becomes ethical. It's the same story, but reinterpreted through the lens of the Hebrew people. There's another detail, coders, one that is almost never mentioned. In the version everyone hears, God is singular. But in the original Hebrew, traces of a plural appear, Elohim. During creation it says, "Let us make man in our image," Genesis 1:26. And later, after the awakening in Eden, it declares, "The man has become like one of us," Genesis 3:22. That plural is an ancient echo, a hint that the original story may have had multiple protagonists, just like Atrahasis. With time, Hebrew tradition unified those beings into a single sovereign God. But the pattern we've seen throughout this saga, the clash between a power that limits and another that protects, remains in the background. Noah, then, becomes the final version of the archetype, the righteous man, the chosen one, the builder of the ark. But he's not the first. And he's not the oldest version.
3 stories, 1 pattern. Coders. If we place these 3 stories side by side, the comparison becomes impossible to ignore. There are different cultures, different languages, different eras, but they follow the same structure. A god who orders destruction. In Sumer, it is Enlil who decides to wipe out humanity. In Atrahasis, again, it is Enlil who declares, "The noise of mankind is unbearable." Atrahasis, Tablet 1. And in the Bible, the text says, "Yahweh said, I will wipe from the face of the earth the human race I have created." Genesis 6:7. Different names, same role. B, a god who breaks the rules to save. In Sumer, Enki disobeys. In Atrahasis, he breaks an oath to warn the man. The text shows it like this: Enki spoke through the reed wall. And in Genesis, a divine voice guides Noah with detailed instructions, very similar to those in Atrahasis. He's not called Enki by name, but the echoes of the protective role are still there. C, a human who receives the warning, Ziusudra in Sumer, Atrahasis in Akkad, Noah in Genesis. 3 different men, but all fulfill the same function, the receiver of a secret message that no one else was supposed to hear. D, a sealed ark. The Sumerian boat sealed with bitumen, the Akkadian boat built with precise measurements, the Hebrew ark with almost identical proportions, covered inside and out with pitch, in Genesis 6:14. The technical details don't change, only the language does. E, a reset. In Sumer, the gods reprogram humanity after the flood. In Atrahasis, they reduce lifespans to avoid loss of control. And in the Bible, we see the famous limit, "His days shall be 120 years." Genesis 6:3. Same effect, same result, same biological adjustment. Pattern conclusion. Coders. These are not coincidences. We're looking at 3 different cultures, repeating the same structure almost line by line.
Why did 3 cultures tell the same story? Coders. When 3 civilizations separated by centuries repeat the same story, the question is no longer what happened, but why they all remember it the same way. 1. Archaeological hypothesis. The first explanation is historical. Sumer and Canaan had indirect contact for millennia. They traded with the same peoples, spoke related languages, and shared myths that traveled faster than caravans. And centuries later, when the Hebrews were exiled to Babylon, they came face to face with the Epic of Gilgamesh. There it was again, the flood. There was the Ark. There was Utnapishtim, another version of Atrahasis, surviving a global deluge. Archaeologists say that encounter may have influenced the final writing of Genesis. A logical explanation, but not a complete one. Mythic hypothesis. The second explanation goes deeper. Many cultures, from Greece to Mesoamerica, remember a global flood. It isn't a random myth. It's a repeated memory, as if humanity had lived through a collective trauma. A real flood. An event so impactful that everyone told it in their own language. Fragments of the same ancient fear. 3. Spiritual hypothesis. Divine Code's line. But here in Divine Code, we go a bit further. Coders. Because when you compare these stories line by line, they all describe the same conflict. Not between humans, not between empires, but between higher beings. In Sumer, one god wants to erase humanity, and another wants to save it. In Atrahasis, a council decides to destroy, and one single being breaks the rules to warn. In the Bible, the plural Elohim appears at decisive moments, as if more than one will were involved. The same pattern, the same clash, the same drama. A power that limits, another that protects. A design that gets corrected, and a human caught between 2 forces he never fully understood. Coders. When 3 cultures tell the same thing without knowing each other, they're not inventing. they're describing. The problem is not that Noah, Atrahasis, and Ziusudra are different. The problem is that they are too similar.
The echo that outlives the gods. Coders. If you remember the previous episode, we discovered that the flood was not a moral punishment nor a random climate event. It was a reset, an attempt by the gods to restart the human project from zero. But every reset leaves a trace, and that trace is the survivor. Ziusudra, Atrahasis, Noah. Different names, same function, the symbol of what they couldn't erase. Because while Enlil, the god of control, limits rigid order, decides to switch humanity off, another being moves in the opposite direction. Enki, the awakener, the protector, the one who disobeys to preserve something the others wanted to wipe out. In the episode on the Anunnaki flood, we said it. This conflict is not moral, it's evolutionary. A power that fears what humans might become, and another that believes in that potential. And here, in the figure of the survivor, that clash is recorded forever. Because Ziusudra survives thanks to a secret warning. Atrahasis lives because someone breaks an oath. Noah builds an ark because a voice guides him in secret. Coders, that is not coincidence. That is the sign of a plan someone tried to erase, and someone else decided to protect. Eden awakened humanity. The flood tried to extinguish it. But the survivor is proof that someone didn't allow the light to go out.
When the story points back to the sky, coders, if 3 cultures shared the same survivor, how many shared the story of those who came down from the sky? The ones who taught, the ones who guided, the ones who punished, the ones who fell. Because if the flood is a universal echo, the beings who caused it are too. In Sumer they were called Anunnaki, in Akkad, the great gods. In the Bible, the sons of God. In Enoch, the watchers. Different names, similar functions. Higher beings who descended, intervened, and shaped human destiny. Coders. If the pattern of the survivor repeats line by line, what happens when we compare the pattern of the beings who came from the sky? Until next time, coders.